we are looking at quite an interesting matter tonight, an African election documentary. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. For those of you on Facebook, I'm sure you've seen snippets of it. We're talking about promos of this. Basically, it's about election 2008. It was a major election in Ghana for so many reasons. We'll be looking at that, and of course, I'm sure many of you understand the dimensions, the tensions, the angst, so to speak, and everything that circled the elections of 2008. I was involved in it in my own way, where issues were occurring around Rage, where my office was at that time, and many reasons, so many questions. The Electoral Commission office also quite close to my office at that time. So we all know what happened, but somehow, despite all that occurred in time and all the narrow victory that resulted therefrom, at the end of the day, tensions were simmered. But what did we really go through? It's 2012, 4 years down the road, we have another election beckoning, and we're asking whether there are lessons that we can learn from this. Of course, tomorrow, the documentary, An African Election, premieres, and we get to know more about it. What is happening in it is already somewhere out there in the world, Los Angeles, USA, in London, in Burkina Faso, and people outside of our home gets to see it. The story is about us. It's enough for them to talk about us behind our back. We get to see it ourselves this time, and that is tomorrow. So I think it's a good time for us to watch this promo, walk you into what it's all about so you get a good sense of it, and then we'll come into the studio. I introduce the producer and director of the movie, or the documentary if you like, and then he will tell us a thing or two about it. Watch this, we'll be right back.
Listening to the BBC World Service, this is The World Today, and if you've just tuned in, our top story this hour, voters in the West African state of Ghana are choosing a new president.
These elections are crucial for the people of Ghana.
This election is vital to the future of Africa as a whole.
You are attending this rally because you want an improvement in your life. I have already committed my government to free secondary education for all the people of our nation.
It is time for Africans to prove to the world that if given the chance, they can prove that they are capable of managing their own affairs.
Do we want to go forward or do we want to go back? We want to move forward with life.
Ladies and gentlemen, December 7th, protect your ballot boxes the way you will protect and defend your mother.
Democracy should be about how to generate the wealth of society and how to distribute that wealth equitably.
Growth is improving, social services are improving, the wealth of the country is increasing. One of the big issues in this election is the distribution of that wealth that is being created.
A democracy is only as strong or as weak as the participants in the process choose to make it.
It is rare to find in an African country after an election somebody not alleging that they have been cheated.
We are not accepting the voter results. If you don't know what you are doing, it will endanger the whole country.
Where are those figures coming from?
And brother, if you have any other question, let's go ahead. If you don't have anything,
Johnson, as you don't get here, where are those figures coming from?
Madam, this is struggle for power. And people don't simply let power go. Freedom can sometimes come at a cost. Justice will come at a cost.
Anytime there's a new regime, a conscious effort is made to smash members and supporters of the old regime. If we don't stop this cycle of vengeance, we will destroy our country and destroy it to the ashes.
Are in the hands of God.
A peaceful transition will be an example to the rest of Africa. As follows.
Thank Thank you for staying with us, and I'm sure that is quite an appetizer, if we may put it that way, whetting your appetite for tomorrow's premiere. We'll be talking about it. The title is An African Election. That is the documentary. Jareth Mez is the director and producer. Good evening to you. Thank you for coming.
Well, good evening, and very thank you to having me here.
That was about election 2008 in Ghana. But of course, in the year 2012, where we have another election coming, what's the idea behind premiering it in this year and not 4 years ago?
The documentary was conceived as a feature documentary. Let me explain. Feature documentary means that you take all the material, it's not a day-to-day journalistic issue, and you go back to the editing room, in our case with 220 hours of film, and you decide what is it that we want to say and tell. What is the story going to be? Because when you start, you have about 10 stories that you're filming parallel, because you don't know where the film is going to go. You don't know how the story is going to unfold. As the elections were over, we knew in what direction we would go, approximately, but not exactly who would be featured. It depended on how much access we had gained, how much interesting material we had, and in the end, the director's choice of what the message of the film should be. So that was impossible. After 1.5 years of editing, after 1.5 years of trying to find the financing to complete the editing, this was the perfect time to come back. Yes, we could have been back earlier, but the film came into this festival cycle. We had so much success with festivals that kept us on the road before actually coming back to Ghana. And then we realized, okay, now this is a time we have to come back. Election season is up. Everyone's going back to the polls very soon. We better come back home.
Is there a reason why it did not show in Ghana first, since it is about Ghana?
I think the only reason is that we got sucked into the festival circuit. I think that's really the only reason, that we did not want to premiere the film officially prior to going through the festivals. That's a given. It's a standard procedure in the festival. What had there been a festival in Ghana, we would have been here, I hope, if we had been invited.
Why Ghana?
Our family is partly from Ghana. We come from Kumasi originally. Our grandmother, our great-great-great-great-grandfather was the Bantamahene. And so we have, our roots are in Ghana. I grew up in Ghana. I spent 7 years of my childhood here. I hadn't been back for 28 years. I left in 1980, came back in 2008 for the very first time. And I realized I had this need to find part of my roots. And I think it sounds like a cliche, like a lot of people come back. But there was a point in my life where I wanted to know more. I wanted to see where I'd grown up. I wanted to see what had happened to my friends. I wanted to know what had happened to the country. And coming back was a journey which I was trying to explore what had happened in those 28 years, not only to myself and my friends, but also to the country that I loved and I'd grown up in.
I see. You spoke about 220 hours of film. That's a long time to collect material. How long is a documentary?
The documentary was cut down to 87, 89 minutes, so approximately 1.5 hours.
What happens to the over 200 hours of material that you still have?
That is to be archived. You know, we have a lot of interesting interviews. There's a lot of people and actors basically in the film who were shot in, who we filmed, but did not end up in the final film. All of that material hopefully will be used for archival purposes, will be used for educational purposes, depending on the content.
How accessible will that be?
It really depends. There's a copyright, basically. The material belongs to us. I do want to, though, be very clear that I'm trying to make this film available to Ghanaians for free. There is a step in between. We need to find a sponsor who will buy the material and the film so that it can be distributed freely to all Ghanaians, and hopefully also for universities, that we can add all the material that we have for research purposes.
I'm sure you've had occasion to address this issue. I have not seen the full video. I haven't seen it at all. But I've heard from those who say they have seen it elsewhere in London and places like that, that for them it does not quite portray Ghana in the light that they wish it would. It tells a story in a narrow sense, so to speak. It doesn't show what Ghana is as a country, especially if what you sought to find out is the stage at which the country is. And there's nothing beautiful about the country, so to speak. It's just, it looks hungry, it looks pathetic, it looks desperate. What's your response?
Is that so?
I've heard that criticism.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, then let me try to answer the question. I believe, from the reactions that we've gotten so far from the international community, that people see this film as an African success story. Not a story, once again, where we just see the beautiful animals in the Kruger National Park in South Africa. Not a story where we see starving children with flies around their mouths. Not a story where we just hear about corrupt politicians clinging on to power. Not a story just in the slums, you know, of glue-sniffing children. Not the story about the electronic waste that is being dumped in West Africa, also Ghana, but an inspiring story about progressive politicians who have elevated the image of democracy in Africa to an unprecedented high in the mass viewers' world in the West. And I think that is a huge achievement. And it's not my achievement. I was just there to document it. You know, there will always be the naysayers who say, like, why didn't you just show the most progressive, like, television station? I thought that when we filmed at GBC, without wanting to, you know, do any advertising for them, we showed a progressive modern media, progressive journalists who ask tough, critical questions, you know. So I would like to engage in a dialogue with these naysayers to see what it is that they're exactly referring to.
Okay.
I think here's one of the big jokers of this film. In 2000, you had Bush versus Gore.
Sure.
In the end, and I know you have the background, the legal background, in the end, the Supreme Court decided who was going to be the next president of the United States of America. It wasn't the people of the US. And now, how democratic is that? And that is not written in the Constitution. In Ghana, you have the case that you go through the first round, no clear winner, the second round, no clear winner, an unprecedented third round. It boils down to the Constitution living up to the Electoral Commission fulfilling its duties, taking responsibility, making an unprecedented call, and successfully ending the elections. It shows a film where even the defeated presidential candidate accepts and acknowledges his defeat with dignity and pride. And the film will show you that, you know. It's not like in the Ivory Coast, where you need the West to come in again and prove that, you know, we have to help our brothers and sisters in Africa because they can't do it alone. Unprecedented. Ghana, to me, is a success story that should be seen all across Africa and the rest of the world.
So for you, it's a positive story. Those who say that negative inclinations in there are getting this wrong.
To me, overall, it's a very positive story.
Overall?
Overall. Politics is a tough business, you know, and people don't always play fair because in the end, it's the struggle for power. Unfortunately, a lot of politicians often forget that it's about the people they're serving. A lot of politicians do think that it is more important to bring through the ideological line or the personal gain and not the gain of the public. I think that's the danger that we all face. All of us, in a way, are corruptible, in a way. So we have to be very aware, and I think the film is a beautiful reminder that we must not take democracy for granted, that we shall remember what our forefathers fought for, and it should be an inspiring story. And if, you know, there is this film is being instrumentalized or being misused, you know, that is very, very unfortunate, but that was not and is not the intention of this film.
Do you have any plans for this year's general elections?
I wonder if I come back to Ghana, if anyone will let me close to them again after I've, you know, had like unprecedented access. But if I do, I would love to come back. I would love to use the opportunity to show the positive history or to create the positive history of Ghanaian elections, to become the beacon of hope, actually, you know, in not only sub-Saharan Africa. I'm planning on coming back in 2012. It is also a little bit dependent on financial aid, because this film was financed by us in the very beginning. We put our own money into the film. People will always tell you, never do that. Use other people's money, because films usually lose money. But we did. So if we can find financing, I'd love to come back and love to show the second election, also behind the scenes again, to show to the world, you know, how complex politics are, not only around the world, but also in Ghana, in West Africa, and how progressive.
We had an election in 1992, at least under the Fourth Republic,
Right.
1996, 2000, 2004. 2008 was the 5th election under the current constitution, and we are going to have the 6th in December. What made the 5th one of any interest to you?
I think the perception of Africa as being another failed endeavor, that after what had happened in Kenya, after what happened in Zimbabwe, Guinea, Mauritania, that the community, the Western international community, had lost hope again. I was still very unhappy with the way that Africa is being perceived, and I say Africa because in the West, you know, it's people are not like differentiated as much. You know, they put everything in the same pot. That's why the title, An African Election, because I'm playing with that notion. You know, I'm challenging that notion.
You're just taking one question away from me.
I'll give it back to you, hopefully, in another way.
Right.
You know, so it's. I was very disgruntled. I was frustrated. I was frustrated because, you know, I'm half African. It's part of who I am as well, and to see that we are perceived as we were, like, you know, 28 years ago is unacceptable. There comes the point, for instance, where critics say, like, well, why didn't you even show a more progressive and modern Ghana?
Right.
And, you know, I will argue and say, like, good, let's make that film, but if we make a film about that, it should be specifically about that. You know, we can't just mix up everything and make a propaganda promo for Ghana. We lose credibility, you know. That's why I just filmed where I thought this needs to be seen. And I'm lucky, and we are lucky, that it turned out for the better.
One of the major issues was the access you got. Many would consider you an outsider in inverted commas because you've given your background, which shows that you have your roots here, as you say. But many will say, well, they live here, they work the terrain, so to speak, and yet they could not, for the life of anybody, have had access to the strong room of the Electoral Commission or any place like that.
Oh, is that so? Like,
but many have said so.
Yes.
And I'm sure you didn't find many local journalists in some of the places that you went to. What was that single difference maker for you that got you there?
You know, I think because I don't have the history of belonging to one party or another, even though I'm culturally affiliated with Ghana, I must have seemed more neutral. I must have seemed. I cannot say for sure. I did not come to Ghana with a political agenda representing one or the other side. I came to see how elections are held. You know, I wanted to see how far behind the scenes can we get, how transparent is an election in Ghana. Why me? It's a good question. I ask myself because in the beginning, it wasn't as if I wanted to make a film. You know, I wanted to be in Hollywood, where I usually live and work.
All right.
I wanted to be successful in the films there. And I was for a time, and then later on it wasn't going so well. You know, and I shifted coming behind the camera more, and I just started to realize what was important to me. So that whole focus shifted, and I think that's how I then dedicated myself to Ghana and the events. Maybe because I'm a nice guy. I don't know. Maybe because I know what I'm doing. Maybe because I respect people or try to respect them as much as I can, given the work we do. I don't know. I wouldn't say that others. Maybe because I'm making a feature documentary. Maybe I wasn't in the day-to-day business. Maybe people weren't like, oh, this is investigative journalism. He's asking all the wrong questions and he's trying to put us in a bad light. Maybe because nobody really knew. You know, I was saying I'm making a feature documentary. Well, when is that going to be coming out? Well, maybe in a year or two. Really, it maybe seemed so removed, and by that maybe not threatening, because what we filmed, and I made a pledge to all the players, would never be released until after the elections were over. Because material that you film during elections can upset whatever is going on, and one has to be very, very careful about that.
We have another insight from the documentary. Let's watch this. We'll be right back.
The psychology of Ghanaians when it comes to governance or politics generally has been very much influenced by our political history and experiences. I think Ghanaians have realized that the best way forward for this country, and for that matter for Africa, is to have a stable democratic government guided by the principles of good governance.
We need change so that we see a different government who will do better things for us, because the youth are suffering. Now we cannot go to school anymore. No jobs. No people don't want to work.
That's why they say there's no food for a lazy man. Master, I'm a teacher. So that jobs you are talking about, we know there are those jobs, but it's for your party people.
No,
it's for your party people. It's not for any other person apart from your party people. They look at party cards.
Yes. A party card before you be employed as a worker.
Perhaps spend a bit more time on this, but just a final question in this area. We saw the dialogue in that second inset that we saw, and the question one will ask is, yes, that reflects society in a way, but we also have strata of society in Ghana. We could also have seen a different side of society. It could have been the university campus to see how university students, for example, reason in this country. It could have been the offices in Ghana. It could have been anywhere else. But then that picture of the international nature that your documentary has turned out to be still ends up reflecting Africa in a way that the outside world only knows Africa to be.
I disagree. It reflects to me that the ordinary man in Ghana is at a level which nobody will give him credit for.
Okay.
The discussions, the political discussions being held here are not of some illiterate people. It shows that at a certain level, Ghanaians are so progressive and so politically astute. To me, it was inspiring.
Okay.
There was an issue, and I agree with you. I wish, believe me, I wish I could have had more interviews where people freely expressed whom they would be voting for and why they would be voting for which party, why they wouldn't be voting for another party. And do you know what I heard a lot of times?
No.
My vote is in my heart.
All right.
And for whatever reason, you know, someone wants to talk or doesn't want to talk. I can just tell you those were my challenges that I was facing. I wish I could have had some of the more, I tried, even within the media, believe me, I tried to get some more progressive answers and to the bone. Like, what's going on? What do you like about this party? What don't you like about that party?
All right.
In the corporate world, the same. I wouldn't get those answers. Now, you tell me, why could that be? Is that part of what I've missed, the culture, that one doesn't engage and reveal their real thoughts about a political party or their ideology? Maybe you can answer or help me answer that.
Well, I think that you covered some political rallies and you saw people there with the T-shirts and for parties that they supported. There are some die-hard supporters who are avowed supporters of parties. I'm sure those people will be willing to tell you who they will vote for any day.
Right, and that's
and
true.
Why? Because that's also very possible. because they have actually identified themselves at the rally ground. They are supporting, they are screaming, their voices hoarse. But with the ordinary person, like in the studio, if we were to pull one of the directors here and ask him that question, a lot of people will be averse to telling you what their vote is. And that is so much a part of us that even our laws in the Evidence Act protects my vote. And says that no one can compel me to say who I'll vote for, who I will not vote for. And that's why exit polls may be difficult in our parts of the world. They may either not be true, or in terms of the responses you get, or quite difficult to even get people to respond.
I'm glad you're telling me this, because that's one of the big issues I was facing, because I thought I was going to engage in a very, very heated discussion on a very, very high level, and I found myself stranded. I was like, I don't have a story there. And when I did, it was mostly you know, people complaining about other people in a way I didn't want to portray them. I did not want to go to that level of just abuse and misusing the camera to make other people just look bad. Based on what? You know, I wouldn't have the evidence to support that.
We'll be going to another insert soon, but before we do that, let me find out from you. So what did you find about Ghana's politics and Ghana's political leadership through this 220 hours of filming?
I found that actually we're all in the same boat, going into the same direction, just paddling. I mean, you know, trying to go in the same direction, but everyone is paddling in a different direction. And I wondered why, because we are so connected in Ghana. I mean, there's no other country, I think, that people are so connected and interconnected culturally, you know, ethnically, than we are in Ghana. So I came to the conclusion, it is about power. It's about money. It's about who controls the assets, which then makes me believe that, you know, the struggle for power is universal. It's not about Ghana or Ivory Coast or Zimbabwe or the United States. It comes to, you know, who's going to be the best, the fittest, you know. It's almost in a Darwinian way, the survival of the fittest. Do I believe in that? No, I don't, personally, you know. In the end, we go with nothing but our soul. You know, so what is this all about? And it's the question of what is the meaning of life? What matters? What matters for us in life? What do we believe in? What are our values? And we live in a very, very capitalist environment, which unfortunately, in my opinion, has not brought the good to everyone. Yes, there's opportunities, you know, there's the freedom for that, but at the expense of whom? Our luxury in the West is based on what? Is based on, you know, exploiting the resources of other countries, is exploiting people who earn minimum wages. I mean, minimum wages. How can I be happy about that? But, you know, that's universal. It seems to be universal, unfortunately, and I hope there's going to be a trend with this new chance, the Arab Spring, you know, with it starting in Tunisia, moving to Egypt, to Libya, now Syria, that we're seeing a trend in which people want change, but are living up to the responsibilities, you know, of the equal distribution of the wealth.
Did you find anything peculiar to Ghanaian politics?
A lot of palaver. I mean, it seems part of the culture. I don't know any...
What are you calling palaver?
The skills of rhetoric are unbelievable. People know how to talk in Ghana, and they'll talk you out of anything if you're not careful. In a positive way, also, you know, there's a very high level of engagement, and throughout the demographic, and I thought that was unique. I didn't even, you know, voter turnout in Ghana was higher than for instance, in Switzerland, where I also grew up, or in the US, where I live most of the time.
By far.
By far. You know, and I'm like, people are passionate, because you were asking me earlier, what was it about this election? The passion of the people, you know, and there was something funny that I realized also. At the rallies, we'd go and we'd cover, you know, the one party would come in and the party followers would be wearing their T-shirts. The party would leave, and then it seemed like the next party came in, the same people with different T-shirts. And I was like, here's an electorate that is very smart, and I hear things like it's harvest time, you know, when it comes to that. And that can also be dangerous, because it shouldn't just be harvest time, take it and run. You know, I think, and I'm not a political scientist, believe me, I'm a filmmaker.
Right.
What's interesting to me is people and what they have to say. And I think we captured that in a way, in a genuine way, which will touch people in other countries. And coming back, I hope we will find a sponsor for the next project to show even another side of Ghana, you know, in the 2012 elections.
Let's take this inset now, another inset, and then we'll be back to continue the discussion. Watch this.
For Africans to prove to the world that if given the chance, they can prove that they are capable of managing their own affairs. This was Nkrumah's quotation on Independence Day.
Praying to see who will come out to help us, to get us something skills, the hand skills to do something, manpower, so that we can be able to gain something. Yeah.
NPP government want to give free education, and I want to go to school, so surely I'll be voting for them.
President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo.
You are attending this rally because you want an improvement in your life.
We're going to be asking ourselves one question. Are we going forward or are we coming back?
Everywhere, Ghanaians are complaining that there are no jobs. Ghanaians are complaining that they cannot get food
I've already committed my government to free secondary education for all the people of our age.
None of the parties is offering a paradigm shift. All of the parties promise to do the same thing, but some promise to do it better than the others.
We want to modernize agriculture, bring science and technology here.
I'm telling you, we are going to modernize agriculture. We give you fertilizer, we give you the seedlings, we give you the inputs. If there are dams around here, we'll repair them.
Yes, of course, one political scientist says politics is the art of the possible. Another says it is who gets what, when, and how. We are looking at elections 2008 in Ghana. And of course, we'll make reflections on our coming election in 2012 for that. Gareth Mears is the director and producer of An African Election. the famous documentary that premieres tomorrow. So what's the venue?
It's at the International Conference Center, and it starts at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
And what's going to happen is that we're actually going to give away some tickets. The first 200 people who would like to join us will be let in.
Oh, I see, for free?
For free.
First 200.
The first
get
200.
in for free. Now what happens thereafter? The 201 down the road?
You know, we'll make an exception.
But how much do people have to pay? Those who don't come in early, who are not the first 200?
Well, it's about capacity, because the event is by invitation only.
Oh, it's by invitation.
But I felt that I want to open it up, not only by invitation. In that sense, I want to have ordinary folks, in the sense, given a chance to be part of that premiere as well.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the idea.
Great. Let me ask you one question that I'm sure politicians who come there tomorrow, who don't belong to the NDC and the NPP, will ask you. It seems as if there was no reference whatsoever to the other political parties. I don't know that for a fact. As I've told you, I haven't seen the full documentary. But at least at the beginning in the promo, we saw 2 parties. They'll be telling you the other political parties in Ghana.
There's a very short reference that I make, and I admit I did not go into the full landscape of the full political landscape. In the film, I give a hint. You see that there's the CPP, you see there's the PNC, you see that there's independence. But one description comes in very early, that Ghana, because the film was not made just for Ghanaians, it was made for a broad audience. So we had to balance what do we need for people who don't know anything about Ghana to know about Ghana, and what is too much in information, because it's a feature documentary and not just a reportage specifically about the party. So, you know, it's a film that you make as a documentary filmmaker is never ever going to make everyone happy. You know, that's the risk you take.
A few messages here. Prince KFB says, I have seen the documentary already. Though we all played a major part in the 2008 general elections in terms of coverage, I was surprised at the thrills and the tension in Ghana at the time. At the end of the day, Ghana emerged purely a democratic country, since the outcome of the keenly contested presidential election was not determined in the court, but through the poll. And that's a point you raised earlier. Bra Collins Kwame Nee says, he asks, why didn't you bring this right from the onset? Okay, I think it's an issue you've addressed already. He's asking why this was not premiered perhaps in 2009 somewhere. And you've said already that you needed to do some work.
Well, we weren't done till we ran out of money. Nobody believed in the project at some point. What happened was that I had to go back and do my work as an actor to pay my crew, to go back and actually finish the film. So it was also delayed by that. And what I told you about the festival circuit, that the film then entered the festival circuit and we went to one festival after the other.
I see. Interesting. Okay, let's take a final insert here and I'll read a few more of your messages. There's a final insert we have for you tonight. Watch this.
We've started, we just started. It's 7 o'clock and we've started. So it's like, as you see, the people are in the queue. From the first table, you check the list, you present your card. And then if you satisfy that the person's name is in the checklist, we allow the person to go and vote. So that is all. We didn't want to maybe disenfranchise anybody.
Boss, not with you.
He's my friend.
This election is very crucial. So most of the voters or the electorate were at the polling station around 3 a.m. and there were no policemen there at that time. So it created some confusion. But as of now, voting is going on smoothly.
problem, sir.
Okay. No problem, sir. No, sir.
I want people to look at my children and my children not to feel that being African is something to be ashamed of, because Africa is always looked at as a basket case. And more importantly, I want the Western world to come and learn from what we have in Africa, because I think that we have a lot of wonderful things here that are overlooked because we are considered to be poor and backward and unstable. And to show that as a community, we respect, we learn, we grow together.
The NDC says we have won. The MPP says we have won. For the past 5 hours or so, it's been back and forth from the two leading political parties.
Our evidence is right.
We don't hear that.
We're only trying to figure out what exactly we need to get across to the people out there. That's what we are doing.
Yes, we are here to obviously manage and calm tensions, and we want the country to be stable.
We're trying to get 50% plus 1, which is what we need to win, and it's so close now. So that's what we're projecting now.
You want to release some of the results to us? Okay.
Parliamentary 4, and then MPP.
The opposition said they have won, and incumbent says they have won, so we don't know what is going on. Come out, the Electoral Commission, come out and tell us something, that's all.
Louis Obimpoku says, good evening. In fact, when I tune in to some radio stations, I worry quite a bit. Please, the politicians should know that without the citizenry, there would be nobody to govern. The youth should also not allow themselves to be used by some selfish politicians to wreak violence. John Paul Annan says, great idea behind the film. I'm waiting to watch it, and I hope Ghanaians and indeed Africans will learn from it to end useless wars that shamefully take up innocent lives and portray to the West that the African has no idea how to control himself. Ghana indeed is the star of Africa. I think I have a few more coming in, and of course, regular viewers of this show will be surprised that today I'm really sifting through paper. We have some issues with the internet tonight. Awal Ishahaku Kanewu says that I think this film has exposed a certain level of deficiency regarding the conduct of a fair and transparent election. He also exposes the greed and unjustified ego that surrounds the Ghanaian politicians' quest to attain political power. Even though we still have a lot to do as a nation, I have a firm belief and conviction that this film will go a long way to contribute positively towards the consolidation and advancement of Ghana's democracy, as the key political players will inevitably learn their lessons, as well as the Electoral Commission and the entire electorate in general. Good evening. Good evening to you too. Becky Afari asks, I would like to know the time for which the whole documentary will be shown tomorrow. You said 6:30.
6:30 p.m. at the International Conference Center.
And if you are one of the first 200 together, you go in free, Becky. So you have to make it. Felix Hilton Hamilton says, what the producer has chosen to show about Ghana is all that they want to do and get their money from the big TV stations. He should take his video away. I'm sure you hear such comments sometimes, don't you? When, but let me take the final one, then I'll come to you. Dennis Gueli says, good work. It's a wake-up call for the politicians, because it's not only Anas who will be exposing them. Okay, Anas is a leading investigative journalist in this country, and they think that this also brings certain things out. But what do you say to those who think that it's just a quest to make money?
I think it's legitimate to make money. It's only the reality with documentary filmmaking is that nobody pays you money.
Okay.
So we had to put our own money into the film. I can give you some figures if you want to know.
Yes, I'll be happy to hear them.
We spent around $250,000 in the initial phase of making this film.
$250,000.
$250,000 to create a film that would also aesthetically look beautiful enough I said, you know, and there are scenes in the film which do show poverty. But I said, one thing that is important for me, even if we make comments and statements, I want to maintain the dignity of the people.
Okay.
So, you know, there's a point that the gentleman is making, but I think it's time that filmmakers and the tradition of filmmakers, of journalists, be regarded higher. I plead for more budget when it comes to media and to filmmaking in Ghana. You know,
have you been able to recoup your money?
No.
You haven't?
No.
The $250,000 is gone down the drain, so to speak.
It's never going to happen. Because it's also a political topic in a way, you know, some of the big sponsors might not want to touch it, even though I think this is a unique opportunity to do so. But, you know, that's...
So all the film festivals, all the showings in Los Angeles, in London, etc., not bringing in anything?
There's something very sad happening. I made this comment about, you know, the films about beautiful animal parks in Africa. Those are made for a lot of money, up to like £1 million or more.
Okay.
And that's being sold. Films like this that show a more progressive Africa, it seems like there's no interest. Like, people don't want to show these films. So we need, and I'm pleading to the Ghanaian community, to the international community, to help us bring films like this out, you know.
Interesting. What would someone who goes to see it tomorrow walk away with? When it's done, what's the first comment you think a person will say?
I had a speech at TED. It's a convention of some of the biggest thinkers in the world, and it was in Scotland. And after I spoke about the example of democracy in Ghana versus democracy in America, a young lady from Ghana, with tears in her eyes, came to me and I said, you know what, I feel proud to be Ghanaian. I feel proud to be African again. Because a lot of times we are seen as backwards. And I hope that's what people will take with them, you know, something that is given already. You know, it's not something new. I'm not reinventing anything, and I don't mean to be saying like, oh, I have to come to show that there's dignity and pride. No, I'm just reconfirming what is there, but I need the help of Ghanaians so I can transport this story out to the world. And by the way, I just want to make one note. The music that we hear in the film is from the divine drummer, Ganaba, who had passed away.
Yeah.
And I was very proud that we got the music and that we were able and allowed to use the music and to promote his unbelieving and you know, amazing progressive music.
Interesting. We don't get to see it, but there are parts in the video, I'm told, where you are actually in the house of the former president, Jerry Rawlings.
Yes.
He gave you access?
He did.
And you were there for how long?
In Ghana, altogether like 3 to 4 months. You know, but here's the story also. Like, you know, some politicians or players in the field gave us more access than others. And I wish, believe me, I really wish I had had more access to balance out, even though it's a very dangerous thing to do as a filmmaker. But I went to all of the political players and said very early, you will have no final say in this film. And I'm telling you now that if you do not agree to that, I'm walking away right now, because this is not going to be a propaganda movie for you. Unfortunately, we just didn't get as much access throughout from all the players as I wish we had. But that's, you know, the life of a journalist.
But so does it mean that you got more access perhaps from one side of the political divide from the other, and that at the end of it, one group or an observer may say, it seems that you featured this party more than that? We're talking about former President Rawlings.
Yes.
For example, I don't know if former President Kufuor is in there.
President Kufuor is in there.
He's there as well.
Very, very late. I mean, that was one of the most frustrating things for me, because our family knows the former president's family. Our family has relations with all political parties, with all the presidential candidates. Some just gave us more access. At the time, Kufuor was very busy, so there was no time. Nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody knew what are these guys doing here? And I think if they had understood earlier that what we're trying to do is to give an insight, just an insight, not one side or the other, but an insight, you know, the film could have benefited from it. It's not a perfect film. I'm not a perfect person. But I try to do something which I believe in my heart will change the way the Western world will view Ghana, and in terms of that also parts of Africa.
The next thing we're going to talk about, I think Texter really is touching on. Wow. Isahaku Kanewu sends another one. He says, may I know from your guest whether he intends embarking on a regional premiere tour? And if no, then I humbly suggest to him that he includes something like that in his itinerary so that he will help to fulfill the purpose of his film. Where are you taking the film?
The film I hope, will go across Ghana, into the 10 regions, into villages, you know, into really the outskirts, to give everyone a chance to watch the film. We're planning on taking mobile cinema equipment to really be able to be independently screening the films for everyone to see. My dream is that we can do this for free. We're looking for sponsors to do that. After that, we'll embark and continue to countries like Zimbabwe, to countries like Kenya. Let's not forget, in Kenya, in 2006, 2007, in post-election violence, 1,700 people were killed. That was across the ethnic divide. When the 21st century, do these things really still have to happen? No, they don't. I think I can do something. It's a small contribution, but I'm trying. That we go into countries and try to inspire them with the Ghanaian example, the success story in Ghana, that it is possible, despite challenges and obstacles, to have peaceful and successful elections.
Did you, at any point in time during the filming, feel that violence would break out in Ghana?
There was a moment where I was saddened deeply, where I thought, here we go again. Here is, you know, it was at the brink when the alleged facts came in and, you know, it seemed like there was going to be an uproar and civil unrest. I felt disencouraged and I thought, here we go again. Here is what the West says we always do. It's going to go down the drain. It's going to go wrong. And you cannot believe how relieved I was when I could use that footage in the film just to make people believe, oh, we're going there where you think we're going, and just turn around and come out and say, no, that's where you thought we're going, but we were successful here.
So it was that close.
It was that close. That's how I felt. And you know, when journalists, colleagues of mine at the time were asking me, we were at the Electoral Commission, when they were asking me, are they firing in the air or are they firing at the people? I was scared, because then I said, if they don't know and they think that it's even a possibility, that something is really out of control here.
Do you think that you'd have had this much access in any other African country?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't think any other African country is as transparent as Ghana. And, you know, prove me wrong. If there's any country out there that wants to prove me wrong, please invite me so I can go behind the scenes of their election. But I think it's unique about Ghana, you know. I really do.
You've given us your Ghanaian background, but I'm sure you have other backgrounds. German, Swiss?
German. My mother is German. I was born in Switzerland. I spent a big chunk of my adulthood and teenage years in Switzerland.
Okay.
Went to the US later on to study acting and directing. That was in New York, and then later Los Angeles. Lived in Berlin as well.
Okay.
That has been, you know, the journey I've taken so far.
Did you have any influence on your viewpoint of Ghana based on this background of yours, based on the Swiss, the German, the New York, the Los Angeles existence and all of that? Did that color you in terms of your outlook of what you were filming?
I think it did. You know, even though there's critics that say I've portrayed Ghana in a bad light, I was interested in the people. You know, there's something I believe, poverty is a business. It has become a business, unfortunately, in Africa. I think we are being victims of the business called poverty, because certain institutions can exist only because of poverty. So why should we get rid of poverty? And I think there's a more progressive Ghana, and that's why, you know, at the grassroots levels, I was very curious on showing that we're beyond that point. Okay. You know, let's move forward and into a different realm of consciousness when it comes to Africa and how we see it. And I was torn, because I myself have a view of a Westerner, but then also of an African. And these two sides in me were at battle, you know, at odds. And sometimes it was very hard, because I could feel how influenced I had been from the West on seeing Africa in a certain way. And then yet, you know, the pride and the strength of the African emerging and saying, no, that's not true. We can do it, and we can do it better than anyone else in the world.
You think that if we were to film the upcoming elections in 2012, and it was to be screened side by side against what you have in 2008, that it will look any different?
Look, promises will be promises from the politicians to get votes. Maybe they will rethink to make to not make certain promises which they won't be able to fulfill, because in the film you will see promises were made that haven't been fulfilled, or other promises have maybe been fulfilled. So it's, you know, checks and balances, but I think it will, you know, a lot of the rallies will be the same, and I hope you know, some of the money that's used for campaigning will be given to better causes.
I ask that against the background that really the protagonists, frontliners, are the same, except this time candidate Mills is incumbent president. The other time he was out coming from the opposition, even if Nana Akufo-Addo was not the sitting president, his party was in power. I'm wondering if, to your mind, from what you saw, that people will not be confused if we were to screen that one side by side and ask, oh, which year is that? Could people really immediately discern the difference for themselves, or you think the issues will be so similar or so much the same that the difference will be hard to tell?
I think the differences will be hard to tell. But then again, you know, prove me wrong, but I think it's going to be very hard to tell, because it's about gaining votes, it's about making promises, it's about the T-shirts. Maybe the designs are going to be different, you know, maybe the slogans are going to be different, maybe the jingles are going to be different.
Okay.
But in the end, you know, and that's why also this film, I think, serves as a moment where we can reflect, really, you know, what is it that we've done? And where do we want to go with this? Are we just going to repeat something because it's an exercise of democracy? Just because you have elections doesn't mean, you know, the democracy really functions or you're taking it to a high level. This brings me to a thought, you know, in Europe, you know, elections are a luxury. Here, it's a necessity for change, to move forward, to be progressive, you know. And in the West, we've lost a lot of hunger and passion for what we do, and here it's still there, like I said, out of, you know, necessity, but also out of passion.
Well, I have to use back my words. I told you that was going to be the final insert, but we decided to give you a bonus for watching the show. Watch this one. It's really the final insert. We'll be right back.
For the unique contribution that they made to our campaign effort. And I tell you, at the Mills and NDC, we'll go back to the core values of our party.
Sorry. Could you please arrange that cup? It's out of order.
It's your coffee.
I know. It shouldn't be out of order. Okay, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
On behalf of President Rawlings, the former president of the Republic of Ghana, we look forward to sharing our views of the terrain and the atmosphere in Ghana as we approach elections in December.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Your country, the trailblazer in West Africa on democratization, is going through its electoral process. We can learn from the Ghanaian experience, as we are all in the same neighborhood. We are all in the same boat. What happens in Ghana affects all of us, positively as well as negatively. So we are indeed delighted that we can come and have these conversations with you, Mr. President.
Right, sir. Professor Sawyer, you're not new to some of the painful situations we've been through in the past in West Africa. Prof, I am worried because we know that the 2004 election did not have the integrity that it needed. It has created a very unpleasant political atmosphere for all of us. Come and assess things for yourself, because one little mistake, you know, in your assessment, in your report, could undermine the aspirations and the hopes of a population of 20 million Ghanaians.
Thank you for staying with us. Jared, we have to be going, but of course you have to have the final word. What do you want to say before you go about the documentary, about Ghana, about politics, about elections, and about tomorrow's premiere?
I just want to say I've been very privileged to be welcome as I've been. I don't take it for granted that I was given access. I feel it's been a gift, and I hope I can give back a gift to Ghana with that. The premiere tomorrow, I hope, will lead to a very constructive and critical discourse, not only about the film, also about the film, but also about politics, and the way politics should be exercised. You know, there's one beautiful phrase that the Electoral Commissioner says, you know, he says democracy is a learning process. And the question is, are we humble enough to go back to school every time again to learn? And I want to thank you very much.